Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's rant on The Monster Beneath Us, a movie that takes place in 1898 in Yorkshire, about a monster that lives in the basement. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, books 1 through 16, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. This is written and directed by Sophie Osborne. This is my second take. I actually did a little research on the IMDb, and because the thing that threw me off about watching this was the cast. Now, this is a pretty standard horror movie. It's about a monster. Here he is, living in the basement. I'm not sure if he's a vampire or whatever, but it's like one of those legacy monsters. He lives in the house. Story by Becca Harani, who's also one of the stars, or the star, I'd assume. Sophie Osborne writes and directs and co-created the story. So there it is, Yorkshire, 1898. It's very dark, very dark. But if you look at the IMDb, here you have Lady Grace Abington is the name of the character. This is Becca Harani, who to me doesn't look like an English woman from 1898. This is Marshall Hawks, who plays Charles Abington, supposed to be her son. He looks like a little girl to me. You've got Jennifer Lim as Mrs. Horton. She appears to be Asian, and her name is Horton. And then Florence Abington, also black. So, look, I'm not saying there weren't black people and Asian people in the UK in 1898. I'm sure there were. Seems to me that this is a very unusual group of people for Yorkshire in 1898. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying it's like unusual for that time period and unusual for the impression one would seemingly give if you were portraying a story in the late 1800s in the UK. Because the UK was pretty snowy white in that era, is my understanding. On top of the fact that the father is dead or gone, or maybe he's the monster, I don't know. So, like, the pitch of this movie is a woman and her son move into her ex-husband's place. Does that sound like an 1898 pitch to you? No, it sounds like a totally modern era thing. Yeah, in the modern era, 2024, a storyline in which a single mom moves back into her ex-husband's place because for some reason he left it to her. That totally jibes with modern sensibilities. Does it jibe with 1898 sensibilities? And I mean that not in reality, where it could happen. I'm sure it did happen. Somewhere in 1898, some ex-husband gave a house to his ex-wife for some reason when he died. But when you're making a movie, you want to sort of follow some of the impression that people give, depending on the focus of the movie. Now, if the focus of the movie is to show you what life was like in Yorkshire in 1898, and how divorces and mixed families sort of existed during that time, that's a different movie. When you're doing a horror movie, do you really want to go down that path and complicate the movie by saying, well, this is a mixed race family in UK in 1898, and the ex-husband was so generous as to give his ex-wife a house for his son? That doesn't make any sense for the impression you get for the 1800s, right? Families didn't live. Again, I'm sure you could cite a few examples, but it wouldn't be usual for that time period. It would be extremely unusual. It's like this. Let's say I wanted to set a movie in Japan in 1898. And it's about a family who lives in an estate, and one of the family members is white. And like, yeah, he's just, I'm pitching you the horror movie in the trailer, and there's a couple of scenes of this white guy running around, and he's clearly one of the members of the family. And I never address it in the trailer. You're going to be like, wait a minute, how is this Japan in 1898? You'd be like, that doesn't really jibe with what Japan is like. Oh, but don't worry, the Japanese studio felt like they had to give a job to that guy, so, and he's a really good actor, so why are you being racist? That's not what it's about. It's about whether or not you're portraying 1898 in a way that movie audience will go, oh, that's 1898 Yorkshire to me. Or if you're in this agenda like, well, we got to change the perception of the way 1898 looked. Why? That's not the way it looked, is my understanding from the statistics of that era. And changing in people's minds the way 1898 was undermines your whole message, right? The progressive message, which is, well, see, we have to do DEI because we have to make up for the mistakes of the past. Well, people get their history from movies to a certain extent. Now, they're not totally 100%, especially for a movie like this, but they might say, yeah, it was probably that way. Especially younger people who haven't really, they're sort of checked out and they get their history from movies. So yeah, you could change it in their brains. Congratulations. Now when they say, well, people have been oppressed. I mean, certainly in 1898, they were very oppressed. And those people whose brains you've sort of changed will say, no, they weren't. They were all over the place doing all kinds of things. They inherited houses from their ex-husbands. It doesn't make any sense. So you're not even doing what, there's no reason to abandon the facts, generally speaking, in a movie like this. Because it's about the monster. It's not about the journey of an unusual extended family. And their extremely unusual things that they've done or situation for Yorkshire in 1898. There's a reason that's in the credits. You're trying to give people the impression, oh, this takes place during the Victorian era, so we're going to have various period pieces, and there's no cars and no cell phones and blah, 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 blah. Well, then you got to go the whole way, and this should be a cast that looks like they lived in 1898 London. Or London or Yorkshire or whatever. If you're not going to do that, then you have other explanations to put in the trailer, which are only going to distract from the movie. Now, you could ignore all those and just cast, a rainbow connection inside your movie, but it's not going to come off very realistic. So you're undermining the whole point of setting it in that era. So why even set it in that era? Why not just set it in the modern day? You just like to have a dark movie where everybody's holding candles? By the way, the movie's pretty dark. I mean, like, cinematography-wise. Can't see a damn thing in this. And that's not to say the actors can't act. They seem perfectly fine in the roles, but it takes you out of it. It's like the joke online about Ryan Gosling playing Black Panther. I mean, I'm sure Ryan Gosling could do it. He's in shape. He's a good actor. Would you really want to see that? No, you'd be like, this is ridiculous. But if your agenda is to push certain groups of people into positions just to say, look how wonderful and virtuous I am, okay, that part of it's accomplished, but is it going to be accomplished that you've made a good movie that people like? I don't think so. Now, would I watch this movie? Yeah, it's in my wheelhouse. I wouldn't mind it. But it kind of is already a ridiculous movie. It's already, to me, I would dismiss it out of hand. I'd watch it, maybe on streaming. I wouldn't pay for it. But if anybody asked me about, oh, did you watch that movie, The Monster Beneath Us? Yeah, it's totally stupid. Like, I already go into it with that. I would probably make fun of it during the course of the movie. Which is really something you don't want in a monster movie or a horror movie. You don't want the audience laughing at it. That completely undermines it. But you got me right there because of your casting decisions. So, you know, and if you're gonna make that if you're gonna make that casting decision, then you ought to have a blurb in the movie why this family is so unusual and how it pertains to the monster. And if it doesn't pertain to the monster, it doesn't belong in the movie. What this movie is about is a monster in the basement. That's the story. Everything goes into that and moves the story forward. Anything that doesn't do that, your message doesn't belong in the movie. Your virtue signal does not belong in the movie. You don't get extra people to watch this movie just because it's diverse. That doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is it good? And you could have an amazing story with an amazing cast and amazing actors, but you're always going to be like, oh yeah, that was surprisingly good. But, you know, the casting was stupid. That's what you're always going to get. And the people who don't think the casting was a little off or stupid, again, they're going to be left with the wrong impression. So when they go out into the rest of the world and you say, oh, people have been oppressed in 1898 Yorkshire, you know, you couldn't get arrested if you were a different race. And like, those people are going to go, that's not true. That's not true. I just saw a movie about that. There was different people from different races all over the place in 1898. You know? If they see a statistic from this era, oh, you know, Yorkshire in 1898, I gotta imagine it was like over 85% white. They're gonna look at that statistic and go, wow, that can't be true. Because again, people do get some of their history from movies because they assume, you know, the people in the movie at least did some credible research. But that's just not true anymore. These days, the message is more important. And again, that doesn't say anything about the actors and actresses in this movie of different races. I'm sure they're perfectly fine. But to serve the story is the main thing. And casting is important. So if you're going to ignore the casting, well then, you know, 1898 Yorkshire, I don't know. Why not just put, you know, a furry in it? You bigot? And somebody in a wheelchair and somebody with a cyborg arm. I mean, you know, you might as well just cast anybody at random who's an actor who, you know, and completely ignore it. Why not make the women men and the men women? You know, that doesn't belong in a horror movie. You can make arguments for it in other movies. It's a movie, it's a drama about a family who's very different in this time period. Okay, sure, you can make those movies. Might even be good. You can make an alternate reality in which history played out different. Sure, they've made those too. But when you're doing a horror movie, it's about the horror. So you kind of want the setting, if you bother to put Yorkshire 1898 on the screen, you want it to be as realistic as possible based on the data we have. So, it just kind of undermines the movie. Anyhow, first act, there's a monster in the basement. This woman's ex-husband in 1898 Yorkshire leaves her a house because that sounds realistic. And her, she's been a single mom in 1898 and goes to the house, and it's the wish that they live there. So they live there, and there's a monster in the basement. It makes friends with the young boy, who I swear to you, I thought was a girl. He looks like a girl. The monster befriends him, and I assume they defeat. It's very evil by the look at the trailer, and then they defeat the monster in some way. And again, I would still watch it, but now I'd watch it with like, okay, this is a B movie. They couldn't even cast it correctly. It puts you in the wrong frame of mind for the movie. You want me to accept the movie as it is. You want me to go, wow, that was an amazing movie. I was a little scared. Like, that's the kind of thing. Like, I just watched the 1977 movie Dracula. And, the cast is what you would expect in the late 1800s for the UK. Louis Jourdan doesn't really strike me as Romanian, but because of his accent, seems like he has a French accent, but at least he's exotic, he's foreign, so he's cast correctly for the most part. And the rest of the UK cast, they're all lily white, because that's what you would expect in the late 1800s. All right, anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan somewhere in the background. I'll be doing the live stream at 7 p.m. tonight, where if you disagree with my review, you can come and yell at me live in the chat. So tune in for that. We'll see you at 7 for the live stream.